Hey guys, welcome to the Max Invest YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the graph. We're specifically going to be looking at some technical details about the graph, how the graph maintains its decentralization, who the graph's network participants are, and a few different things about the graph. Now, I did a video on the graph yesterday where I did an overview of what it actually is, and if you haven't already watched that video, or you don't fully understand the graph, I'd suggest giving that video a watch. Now, anyway, if you enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, and remember, nothing in this video is financial advice. So let's get into the video. Now, the first thing that I want to discuss is the graph's tokenomics. As we can see, the graph has a token and it's called GRT. Now, the GRT token currently has a price of $1.10. However, there's roughly 4.72 billion GRT in circulation, and there's a maximum supply of 10 billion GRT. This means that about 47% of the supply is circulating, and it still has a bit of room to be diluted. As a direct result, the market capitalization of the graph is 5.2 billion, but the fully diluted market cap is 11.1 billion. Of course, we do want to be looking at the fully diluted market cap and seeing where this fully diluted market cap will go, as there is a bit more inflation in store for GRT. Now, one interesting thing to look at about the GRT is the distribution and circulation schedule of GRT. As we can see, in the first couple of months, GRT was inflating like crazy. There was tons and tons of GRT being given out, and this heavily diluted the coin. GRT started with about 2 billion coins in circulation, and within a few months this went to 5 billion. We can clearly see this on the graph where there's a huge inflation schedule. Of course, the reason for this is quite self-explanatory. When GRT first released their token, they wanted to get it off the ground. They needed heaps and heaps of people to come into the system and help out with indexing, because GRT inflation is actually paid out to the people who help out the system. So if they're paying out heaps of GRT, they're getting tons and tons of people to help out the system, and this is a really good way of bootstrapping the ecosystem and getting it started. So I think this is a good strategy. However, one important thing to note is in the first 6 months of this token, it probably wasn't a good time to invest in it because of this heavy inflation schedule. However, right now, the inflation has already slowed down. As you can see, from 6 to 12 months, it already slows, and then from 12 months to 60 months, it's very slow. So the inflation schedule slows right down, and now is probably a good time if you're purely basing it off inflation to actually start looking at the graph. So this is why I've came in and started looking at it right now. It finally looks like the correct time for the graph, in my opinion, not financial advice. Now, the next thing that I do want to discuss is the graph's ecosystem and the graph's participants, because what we want to know is we want to know how the GRT token actually accrues fundamental value. Every token needs a value proposition. Of course, Ethereum's value proposition is that it's used to pay for fees to the Ethereum network. Chainlink's value proposition is that Link is used to pay for Chainlink node operators for delivering data on chain. So all of these different things have value propositions. Now, the graph has a very simple value proposition. Essentially, the way the graph works is individuals all around the world index subgraphs. These subgraphs contain a bunch of different data and decentralized applications, and consumers will draw from this data. So they'll go onto the subgraphs, use it. Now, every time someone checks out one of these subgraphs, a query is made and money is paid to the person who made the subgraph. Essentially, all that happens here is the graph is going to index some data for a decentralized application. The decentralized application will use that data, and every time an individual user sees that data, a query will be made. This means that a tiny bit of money is going to be paid to the person who made the original subgraph. Now, the graph is about 500 million daily queries because lots and lots of different people are viewing all of the different subgraphs and viewing all of the decentralized applications that have collated these subgraphs together. So, the important thing is who actually makes these subgraphs, because if the Graph Foundation just made the subgraphs, it wouldn't be that decentralized. Instead, what happens is these people called indexers make a subgraph. Now, anybody all around the world can be an indexer, and the only thing you need to know to be an indexer is you need quite a bit of GRT tokens, and you also need to be very technically skilled. So it's like the Graph are hiring people for a job. They're hiring out all of these different indexers all around the world. So what happens is the indexers will put together these subgraphs. The indexers will go back through all of Ethereum's history, check out all of the data, and put it together in a nice little subgraph. These are going to be people from all around the world in different countries on their computers making up subgraphs that decentralized applications will then go on to use. So, essentially, these indexers will earn query fees, indexing rewards, and they will also earn some money from a rebate pool for doing this. So, the first thing that these indexers will earn is they'll earn indexing rewards. Essentially, what happens is the graph has an inflation schedule. Now, every time new graph comes into circulation, these are paid out to indexers for their services. Of course, if you're a better indexer, curators, who we'll go through a bit later, will signal that you're a better indexer, and you'll get more and more indexing rewards. Now, the next thing that I've already alluded to is query fees. Essentially, every time someone uses the subgraph that an indexer has made, the indexer will get paid a small fee. These fees will stack up and they'll make quite a bit of money. Of course, if the indexer has made a very, very good subgraph, more decentralized applications will use it and they'll get more and more fees. If they've made a bad subgraph, they may not get any use and they may not get any fees. So this is a good way to figure out which indexer is doing their subgraphs right and where the data is coming from correctly. Now, the last revenue stream is a rebate pool, and to be honest, I found this one quite confusing. However, what indexers will do is when you choose to start making subgraphs and indexing, you need to stake your GRT tokens. So you need to buy some GRT tokens and put them on the line, and then you'll get a bit of a rebate back from these staked GRT tokens over time. Now, if an indexer is acting maliciously, so an indexer is maliciously indexing subgraphs, putting in the wrong data and putting in the wrong information, well, their stake can be slashed. So you put up GRT tokens to actually stake them. If you do the wrong thing, you lose these GRT tokens. This means that indexers are actually economically incentivized to do the correct thing, and it means that subgraphs are going to be made well. This also means that if you're thinking of actually indexing, you better have some technical skill to do so. However, there are hundreds of indexers for the graph. There's heaps of people around the world who want to take on this challenge, index data, and get this data used. This is a system that works purely based on incentives, and it's a system that works quite well. The next participant in the graph is a curator. What a curator will do is a curator will go off and analyze all of the different subgraphs. So they'll go check out all of the subgraphs done by indexers, and then what they'll go on to do is they'll signal which subgraphs they think are the best, which are technically superior, and which work the most. The way that a curator will signal which subgraph is best is they'll actually deposit some GRT tokens into that subgraph. So they'll hold some GRT tokens, deposit it into the subgraph, and then they'll actually earn shares in that subgraph. This means if that subgraph goes really well, lots of applications use it and it makes lots of fees, the curator will make money. It also means the curator has an economic stake into that subgraph, which means they know what they're doing, and it means that they're economically incentivized to choose the best subgraphs. Also, What this does is it means that decentralized applications know which subgraphs are best. They can see which ones have been signaled by curators and which ones have not. Another thing that a curator does is it signals which subgraphs should be made. If there's data that should be used but indexers haven't came up with it yet, a curator will say we need this data right now, and the indexers will go off and make this data. Now, the next participant is a delegator. A delegator is really simple. In fact, you or me can be a delegator. All you need to do is delegate off some GRT tokens. So, essentially, what a delegator does is a delegator chooses an indexer to delegate their GRT tokens to. They can choose one indexer or multiple indexers. Now, a delegator delegating tokens to an indexer is kind of similar to a curator, but not quite. What it does is it shows that you trust this indexer and this indexer is better. Of course, an application will then see that an indexer has got a lot of tokens delegated to them, and they'll choose to use this indexer because it's well trusted and a lot of people are delegating to it. Of course, what this means is that delegators will then get a portion of query fees from this, and they help secure the network. So indexers will want to make very good subgraphs in order to actually get people to delegate to them and in order for decentralized applications to use them. I know it sounds a bit confusing, but all you're doing is you're saying this subgraph is the best, I'll delegate some tokens to it and I'll earn a bit of the reward for doing so. Everyone's economically incentivized to do the correct thing. Now, I do want to go through a brief example of how all of this is going to work in conjunction with each other. Now, this example is quite similar to one that I found off a YouTube channel called Finematics, so I do want to credit them in this video. Now, essentially what happens in this example is new data is needed. So let's say a new decentralized application is starting up and this decentralized application needs data indexed for them. Now, what will then happen is a curator will signal that a new subgraph needs to be made. The curator is going to say, hey, we need some data over here and signal the new subgraph. Now, a decentralized application developer could just become a curator himself and signal that they need some data if no other curators are doing this. Essentially, what will then happen is indexers will realize that new data is needed, indexers will come over and they'll actually make this data. They'll put it all together in an easy to understand fashion and index the data. Now, delegators will then go on to delegate to the indexers they like best. If there's multiple indexers all trying to make this new subgraph, the delegators will essentially choose which indexers they like the best, and these indexers will probably have the most technical skills and they'll have the best subgraphs. The consumers will then use this new subgraph, they'll pay out fees to the indexers, and then the system is essentially complete. Since this video is already going a bit over time, I'm not going to go too much into the last part I had planned. However, essentially the way that an individual knows if an indexer is doing the wrong thing and they need to slash their stake is through fishermen and arbitrators. Essentially what fishermen are going to do is fishermen are going to signal that an indexer is doing the wrong thing, and a fisherman will earn a proportion of the amount that is slashed from this indexer, and an arbitrator will come in to make sure that the fisherman is actually doing the correct thing, and they all have economic incentives to do this. So fishermen and arbitrators choose if an indexer should be slashed for doing the wrong thing. Anyway, that was the last part I had in the video, and this brings us to the end of the video. This is essentially the end of my deep dive into the graph. We did 2 good videos on it, and if you enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching the video.